It's perfect. So I think we can start with the call. Thank you again for joining, everyone. I think, as you probably know, my name is Piyush Ranjan. I'm the founder and chief consultant at Management Masters. We are an admissions consulting firm for the top MBA programs internationally, and our expertise essentially is that we help candidates apply to the top 50 MBA programs worldwide. Now, since the 2023 intake admission season is starting soon, in fact, Harvard Business School has already they have already announced their details, they have announced the deadlines and everything. So what we are planning to do is essentially run a series of Ask Me Anythings, where we can really answer a lot of questions that candidates have, and see how it works out, answer any questions, any doubts that you have, that people have. So perfect. So I think this is good to start. I think we have quite a few people here. Thank you so much for joining again. We are recording the session as well, so most likely we will be sharing the the recording of the session at the end of the call probably. Perfect. Thanks again. So let's, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box, and we'll start picking up the questions one by one. In the meanwhile, just give me a second. All right, I think we are good. So in the meanwhile, a very quick update on us. So we are essentially based out of Jamshedpur. I started Management Masters almost 3 years ago in 2019 to help candidates apply to international MBA programs. And since then, what we have done essentially is we have helped candidates get into some of the top business schools around the world, including schools like Wharton, INSEAD, Kellogg, Booth, Berkeley Haas, HEC Paris, London Business School, ISB especially. We have a lot of candidates who want to go to ISB. And yeah, I can't wait to answer your questions. There's a very quick request I would have with respect to the kind of questions. Essentially, please don't ask us questions which relate very personally to you. Try to keep them as generic as possible so that they can help other candidates as well. If you have personal questions, if you have questions very specific to your profile, please feel free to reach out to us separately on our emails. At the same time, you can also look at our website. Feel free to book up a specific call for yourself where we can go into the details of your profile and answer those questions for you. I think we have quite a few people now already. We have almost 50 people, so that's great. And let's start with the questions initially. So we have the first question from Anavrin one. So her question is, or his question, I'm not really sure. I've just started with my job. Is it the right time to give GMAT? That's a very interesting question and something that we receive from a lot of people as well. The answer that we have usually is, if you are planning to, or if you think you will apply to international MBA programs, MIM programs, anytime in the next 5 years, right? Whether you are in the first year of your job or the 5th year of your job, it does not matter. But if you're planning to apply to any kind of job, any kind of international programs which utilize the GMAT or the GRE over the next 5 years, absolutely go ahead and work on your GMAT and get it done. The great thing with GMAT or GRE essentially is that they are valid for 5 years. The second great thing about them is that you don't really have a set timeline for them. So it's not like you will only have the exam once or twice a year. You can really take them whenever you want, whenever you feel ready for that. And you don't really have to worry about it, right? So absolutely, if you feel that you're going to apply to any international MBA, masters, or any programs which utilize a GMAT or the GRE in the next 5 years, absolutely go ahead and sort of apply, go ahead and take the test, get your scores in hand, and then for the next 5 years, you're absolutely tension free. All right, so we have the next question. Shivanshu, absolutely, please feel free to put in your question because we've started. So, there's no presentation that we will have. We're just going into answering questions. So we have another question from Ansh Jambore. I'm not from a top undergrad program in India. I want to apply for deferred MBA programs in the US if I get a GMAT above 750 and do CFA and FRM. Will I be able to get into top deferred MBA programs in US? That's a very interesting question, and I think a very, very sort of important thing here to understand the psychology of admissions, right? There is no one in this world, not me, not any other consultant, not even admissions teams, who can tell you if you will actually get into an MBA program or not. The only way to figure that out is to actually apply. So what I would suggest is absolutely go ahead, prepare properly, and then apply for your target programs. Because if you don't apply, then you're definitely not getting it. If you apply, then there could be some chance of getting it, right? So the only way to figure out if you will actually get into a deferred MBA program or an MBA program is to apply, right? We have another question from Aditya Pandey. If we leave out Ivy Leagues, which are the genuine good programs like 5 to 20, 25 programs to target for, like NYU, Fuqua, etc., including GMAT accepting programs in India, except ISB? All right, so let's break this question down into two segments. One is which programs accept GMAT in India, right? So let's talk about that. As far as we are concerned, we usually work only for the top 50 programs in the world, and we utilize the rankings from Financial Times, right? So if you look at the Financial Times rankings, usually there are 4 programs from India which are, in that top 100 ranking, and those are ISB, obviously. And then apart from ISB, it's IIM Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and Calcutta for the 1-year MBA program. Now, the 1-year MBA programs at these IIMs, they are different. They do not require CAT. They are meant for people with at least 4 to 5 years of experience. So those could be some interesting programs to target if you're looking for MBA programs in India, right? So that's the good schools in India. As far as internationally is concerned, again, what I would suggest essentially is to look at the Financial Times rankings, look at the top 50 schools in the Financial Times rankings, or even schools after top 50, right? You have the list of top 100 MBA programs throughout the world. So I think look at those schools, and those are all really, really good schools. Because one thing that you have to keep in mind is you're looking at the top 100 in the world. You're not looking at the top 100 in Faridabad, right? So it's really, really top-notch, highly selective schools that you're looking at. So almost all the schools that you will see in those rankings, at least from Financial Times, they're really good programs to target. So I hope that answers your question, Aditya. Let's move to the next question. We have one from Karndeep. How is it different of doing an MBA from India and abroad? Okay, that's a pretty interesting question. I will again sort of, break it up into multiple areas. When you're looking at an MBA program from India or abroad, I think the biggest difference first that comes is essentially the overall class structure, right? The class profile that you have. So if you look at Indian programs, usually the generic Indian MBA connotation essentially is that people go for an MBA very early in their careers. They do not have a lot of experience, whereas international programs usually have people who really take international programs really prefer a lot of work experience in their candidates, right? So if you look at most of the international programs in the US, if you look at it, you will have almost 5.5 years of experience at the top MBA programs. If you look at European schools, the European programs usually have a slightly bit higher work experience. So the kind of class that you're getting with an MBA program, especially internationally, is going to be very rich in work experience. So that's one of the biggest differences. The class profile itself is a huge differentiator. The second biggest thing that you will have essentially is that in terms of Indian programs, most of the people that you will have, 99% of the classroom will be Indian candidates, right? You will obviously have a lot of people from different cultural backgrounds and social backgrounds, yes. But from a cultural point of view, they will remain Indian, right? So 99% of your classroom is going to be completely Indian. This is a huge difference when it comes to international programs, because especially in the US, classes are around 40% international. You will be meeting people from tens and tens of countries. I think easily around 50 to 60 countries per batch. When you go to European schools, this is even higher. In European schools, almost 90 to 98% of the class is international. And this is, again, a very key difference between US and Europe as well. But this is one of the core aspects of international programs. The third thing is essentially, if you look at, because you also mentioned about the jobs, when it comes to the jobs, I think this is a huge differentiator as well. In India, obviously, the Indian B schools have a very strong placement support associated with the program. Whereas in terms of international programs, usually you will not have the same level of placement support. International placements or international B schools rely very heavily on placement processes, very similar to how you would sort of find a job for yourself once you've started working. So off-campus placements, if you will. They will sort of help you with connecting with people. They will sort of help you in organizing various events where you can meet with people and sort of build up your network and then find a job for yourself. But the job scenario or the placement scenario exactly, it doesn't work exactly the same as how it works in Indian terms. So I hope that answers your question, Karandeep. If anybody has more detailed questions around this, please feel free to sort of come into this and sort of expand on the question. Okay, so a very quick question from Kanchi. What kind of facets do we help students for? MBA only or GMAT plus MBA? So we are a very boutique firm which focuses only on the MBA application part, right? So we do not help with GMAT prep. We only come in once candidates have taken their test and they want to apply for the application process, right? So that's where we come into picture. So we do not really help with GMAT prep. We only help with the admissions part of it, or the applications part of it, right? Let's move to the next one. Okay, Shreya has a question. How do consultants help in making the application better, and what are the things individuals can maybe miss? Okay, that's again a very, very important question, or very interesting one actually. So, consultants essentially, when you look at the MBA applications, right, especially if you've never written international MBA applications, it's a bit more difficult to sort of explain, but MBA applications internationally, right, they focus a lot more on the kind of person that you are and the overall profile that you have. That matters quite a lot. So what you need to start doing is essentially realizing that they're not the same as CAT programs, right? So in CAT, one of the biggest, if you're applying through CAT, right, the score matters the most, right? The CAT score can really make or break your profile. Whereas if you're looking at international MBA programs, it's a lot about the way you portray your story. And when I say your story, it essentially means that everything that you have done in your life, it could be from your childhood, it could be through college, it could be at work, whatever you have done, right? everything comes into picture, and you are supposed to tell your story to the admissions team. And that's why you have so many essays to write. That's why you have the recommendations. And that's where essentially the admission consultants come into picture. Because what happens very often, what we have seen with candidates, is that people usually, they tend to undermine or undersell themselves. They don't really realize the kind of stories that they have. It's not that everybody faces those issues. Some people are able to sort of very clearly introspect and figure out what they want, how they want it, why do they want it, and they are able to sort of bring out their stories very nicely. In which case, a lot of people don't require consultants as well. But for a lot of candidates, that's a very, very difficult and a very tricky part to follow. And that's exactly where consultants come in. Consultants essentially act as people who can guide you in the right direction of, how should you be thinking about your experiences, or how should you be sharing about your experiences in your applications. That's basically what consultants do. And if you have a clearer story which aligns with your schools, with aligns with your target schools and what you want to do, that just makes your application much better. I hope that sort of explains a little bit, but again, if you have more detailed questions, please feel free to sort of put that down. We have another question from Ankit. Are there any schools where the chances of scholarships are higher than other schools? Any specific points one should focus on to increase chances of a scholarship? Okay, that's an interesting one. So scholarships, essentially, I don't think there would be one particular school which has a great chances of scholarship compared to all the other schools in the world. I don't think that's the case. But usually, internationally, if you look at US schools, they usually have much more scholarships available because they are much better funded usually. So that's something that I would say. US schools usually end up giving out much more scholarships in general, right? With respect to looking at how you can increase your scholarship or how you can increase your chances of scholarships, one factor that really plays well here is, the overall strength of the application obviously matters, but a very, very common thing here is the GMAT or the GRE score that you have that can sort of play a big factor into getting scholarships. One thing that we have seen from our past experiences is essentially, if you are, the higher the gap or the higher the difference, the delta between your particular score and the average score of the school that you're applying to, the better your chances to get a scholarship. So, for example, if let's say if you're applying to a school where the average GMAT score is around 700, and your GMAT score is also 700, the chances of getting a scholarship for you will be much lower compared to if, let's say, if you had a GMAT score of 750, right? Because there, the difference between the average class profile and your profile in terms of your GMAT score or academic credentials is very high, right? So that is something what we have noticed works out quite well for candidates if, let's say, if that's one of the, as one of the criteria. But again, do keep in mind, GMAT score is not the only thing that matters when it comes to scholarships, right? We had a candidate this year who had a 760 in GMAT, and while he did receive 100% scholarships from two very, very good schools like Darden and Ross, he received 100% scholarships from both of these schools. But then he also got into Chicago Booth, and Chicago Booth gave him 0 scholarship, right? So it's very difficult to sort of predict what kind of scholarships you will get. It's impossible to do that. But yes, having a great GMAT score definitely helps with that. So I hope that answers the question. Then Ankit Azad has a question. What should we focus on while doing research about your B school? Okay, that's a very, very important question. Thanks for sharing that, Ankit. So the first thing is, when you're looking at your B school, right, what you have to realize is that you need to know everything about your target B school. And that includes right from the career outcomes, right? So is the school aligned with the kind of career outcome that you have planned for yourself? The second thing is the kind of resources that it provides towards those career outcomes. The third thing is, identify the course, the curriculum, what aligns with your interests, identify the community, the events that happen at the school which align with your interests. Really talk to people and try to figure out the kind of atmosphere that you have, the environment that you have within the school, because that also becomes very, very important. It can actually sort of give you the sense of if you actually want to go into that school or not. We have had candidates who initially thought they would really want to apply to one particular school, and then they started researching and they didn't really like the vibe of the school itself, right? So that also is a very, very important thing. So look at everything about the school as much as you can know about the school in all different areas. So I hope that sort of helps with that, with your question. Okay, then there's a next question. How important is the score for getting into ISB? So it's not really for ISB only, but in fact, almost all the top schools in the world, right? GMAT or GRE obviously are an important step, but they usually account for hardly 15 to 20% of your overall application, right? Just to give you a very simple example, I had a 750 GMAT score, but I was rejected by ISB. At the same time, I've worked with so many candidates who had scores like 670, 680, and they have gotten into ISB, right? So the score is obviously important, but it's not the most important thing. It does not mean that if you have a very, very low score, you have a 550 and you say, score is only 15%, so I should get in. I don't think that would happen much. But essentially, look at the score as one factor for sure. But it's quite an important factor in terms of sort of proving your eligibility or showcasing that you align with the class profile at the school. But at the end of the day, it's going to matter somewhere like 15 to 20% of your overall application. So I hope that helps. We have another question from Navjeet. How to evaluate if one needs an MBA or not? Also, is there any right time or right age to apply for an MBA? That's a very, very interesting question and a very, very difficult one. How do you evaluate if you need an MBA or not? The first thing that you need to realize here in this particular question, do you really need an MBA or not, is essentially, it requires a lot of self-introspection on your front, right? To really realize if you require something like an MBA or not, because at the end of the day, it's a huge investment as well. Usually what I suggest people, or what we have seen work very well with people, or those who have come to us who want to work with us, it's usually related to their career growth, right? Either somebody is lacking the kind of career growth that they want, or they want to switch their careers into a different domain, a different industry. And they're unable to do that without an MBA. So I'll give you my example. When I went for my master's in management, I went for that because I came from an engineering background, and without a master's or without a management degree, it became very difficult for me to switch from an engineering background to the business side of things, right? And that was something which was the catalyst which said to me that I needed to go for an MBA, right? A lot of candidates that we have worked with, they come from a particular background. They're already, let's say, in the business area, but then they want to switch over to a different profile, or they are stuck in their career in the sense that they've been in that position and they really want to move quicker in their career, and they don't see that happening without an MBA, right? And that is the first way of really figuring out if an MBA actually is required for you. But this is once you have started thinking about it. The second step is going to be really talking to people and understanding from their experiences if MBA is actually the right answer. Because it could be that you might hit an obstacle in your career, but it may or may not mean that you definitely require an MBA or not, right? There could be other ways of going about it as well. So you need to start with that self-introspection first, and then you need to sort of move into realizing or talking with people and sort of getting some feedback about, what could be the potential options for you. MBA is one of the options. It's not the only option, right? And then see what works out best for you. So I hope that helps. Let's, okay, there was another part to that question. Is there any right time, right age to apply for an MBA? As far as international programs are concerned, there is not really a huge sort of focus on the right time or right age. It's more about the motivation that you have, right? So you will often hear people with very high experiences, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years experiences, wanting to go for an MBA. And if they're able to justify why do they really want it, if they're able to justify that need for an MBA at that point of time, they're able to go there as well, right? So it's not really a huge issue. We have another question from Yugandhara Patil. What are the chances of a student from tier 2 college with a decent profile and good academics to get into deferred MBA programs abroad, as well as ISB, YLP? Quite a lot. It's if you apply, then you will have a chance. And the thing that you need to realize is, unless and until you apply, there is no chance. So absolutely prepare your profile, make sure that you stand out, and then you apply for those programs. So we have worked with quite a few people, especially from ISP, YLP, who came from tier 2 colleges and they've gotten in. So until and unless you take the shot, the answer is always going to be no. We have another question. How much is it relevant that leaving the job and go about doing MBA from India or abroad? What could be the ROI when doing MBA from India or abroad? I'm not really sure I understand the question very well, Karandeep. So if you could explain a bit, that would be great. Let's sort of move to the next question. So we have a question from Som. I already have an MBA degree. Want to go for another 1-year MBA? Is it possible in a program like ISB? I have seen people go for a second MBA with ISB, and yes, if you're able to sort of justify the requirement for that MBA, absolutely, yes. We have a question from Aishwarya. How is the scaling done in the GRE GMAT score? There's absolutely no scaling done for most of the schools. There could be some schools who scale the scores, but if they do, they would sort of mention that on their website. If the schools don't mention anything, there is absolutely going to be no scaling. Your GRE scores are separate from your GMAT scores. They are evaluated separately by the schools, and that's how they look at it, right? We have another question from Shashank. Can you address about the GMAT versus GRE thing? If I apply to GRE, will my profile be at a disadvantage in the view of AdComs? Absolutely not. This is I was waiting for this question almost. Feel free to take any of these tests, GMAT or GRE. It does not matter for 99% of the schools. There could be some schools which do not take up GRE. So for example, I think IIM Calcutta, for their MBA executive program, they don't take GRE, but that's probably the only school that I know of which does not accept GRE at this point of time. And if a school accepts GRE, and unless they have mentioned specifically on their website that GMAT has a preference, there is no such preference, right? So 99% of the schools, feel free to take GMAT or GRE. It does not matter to the schools, right? What they want is essentially a good score. All right, so then we have a question from Ananya. I'm a recent BBA graduate. I'm planning to take work experience of 2 years. What options do I have in US or Canada for MBA, considering I have a 3-year undergraduate degree? For Canadian schools, we don't really have a lot of idea, very honestly, because we don't work on Canadian schools too much. We focus only on the top 50. For US schools, if you look at the top 50 programs, I think almost 99% of the schools would be open in the top 50 list. There would be very few schools which are not open for 3-year degrees, right? So almost all the schools would be open. I think one of the prominent ones which is not open is Berkeley Haas. That's one school out of the 50 schools that I've just mentioned. Then we have another question from Kanchi. For candidates with experience of 12 plus years, what kind of GMAT scores exist? What kind of GMAT requirements exist? If they intend to target top tier colleges and not essentially courses programs catering to experienced candidates. I'm assuming that you're referring to the regular MBA programs, Kanchi. So again, as far as the GMAT requirement is concerned, it remains the same as for everyone else, right? So if whether you have 12 years or 2 years of experience, the thumb rule is essentially going to be that you try and focus, or you try and get your GMAT scores above the average of the class profile, right? So if the class profile average GMAT score is 700, try to be above that. If the average GMAT score of the class is 730, try to be above that. So that's basically what I would suggest. Shivangi has another question. I wish to do MBA in a couple of years. I've started my GMAT prep. 4 years of experience. I'm thinking if a 2-year MBA abroad adds more value than executive MBA from ISB IAM. All right, so that's an interesting question again. There is no standard answer to this because what would work for you would be very different for somebody else, right? So if you look at the international 2-year MBA programs, most of them, the average work experience is around 5.5 years. If you look at most of the Indian 1-year programs, apart from ISB, ISB has a 4.5-year work experience average. Most of the IIMs have around 8 to 10 years of average experience. But again, it really depends on the person. What exactly are you looking for? If you are looking for something which aligns better with ISB and the IIMs, absolutely go ahead for those. If what you're looking for aligns better with international 2-year MBA programs, go ahead for those. There's no right answer in this, which adds more value. It's a very, very personal sort of decision, right? I don't think there is any question. Aishwarya has something. At the time of writing GMAT, you have the option to choose 5 universities or 5 programs. Yes, you do. You can sort of send your GMAT score to 5 schools for free. And I very strongly suggest choosing those 5 schools, right? Because once you are done with that, I think to send an extra score to any school, you will need to spend around $30-$35 per school, right? So it saves you almost $150 very, very easily. We have another question from Mudit. I'm willing to apply to deferred MBA, but I'm afraid of the low success rate. So I'm thinking of applying to MIM2. Should I focus on only one or both of them? That's a very, very good question. I would absolutely suggest you to apply to both of those because, as you said, deferred MBA programs have very low success rates. So absolutely go ahead and apply to MIM programs as well. The great thing is that they have very different timelines, right? So deferred MBA programs, most of the deadlines are in April. MIM programs, the applications will start in September, right? The first deadlines are going to be September, October. So you can really go ahead and apply for both because that perfectly makes sense. Once you have applied to all, then you can have your pick of the choice. Where do you really want to go? So absolutely go ahead and apply to both. We have another question from Shivanshu. It's quite a long one. Let me just read through. I attempted CAT, couldn't crack it, reattempting. Maybe. Okay, Shivanshu, I'm very sorry, but this is a very, very long message. I don't think I'll be able to sort of answer this at this point of time. please feel free to drop me a message separately and we can sort of take that up. We have another question. From Ishani, does it really make a difference if we apply in round 1 versus round 2? If yes, how big or small a difference? All right, so there's a general saying that chances of getting in are higher in round 1. What's your take on this? All right, a very, very interesting and important question, of course. Should you apply in round 1 versus round 2? Now, if you look at the chances, right, percentage-wise, there is absolutely no difference, right? So if, let's say, school X, they receive 100 applications in round 1, they select 10 people out of that, the acceptance rate is 10%. It's going to be exactly the same as round 2, right? So percentage-wise, or if you look at the acceptability rate, there is usually never a difference, right? So it's absolutely the same. But there are certain things which change. In round 1, usually you have a much better shot at getting scholarships. That's because the scholarship pool is completely open. And if there is $100 in scholarships available, it's open for all the candidates, and schools can give out much better scholarships. When you go to round 2, that $100 has already been reduced to $70, right? So your chances of getting scholarships can get affected. In general terms, or in a bit more non-tangible way, what you can look at is round 1 usually receives fewer applications compared to round 2, right? So even though the acceptance rate is obviously going to be the same, the rate is the same, the overall competitiveness of round 1 is usually lower than round 2. If you look at it in data terms, you can assume it to be, let's say if a school receives 100 applications in total, it's probably going to be something like 25 to 30 applications were received in round 1, 60 to 65 were received in round 2, and the rest were received in round 3 or later, right? And that competitiveness essentially adds to this myth that the chances of getting in round 1 are higher than round 2, right? In terms of acceptance rate, it's absolutely fine. It's absolutely the same, but in terms of competitiveness, round 1 is definitely better compared to round 2, right? So I hope that sort of clarifies things a bit for you, Ishani. We have another question. What is the timeline we should keep as a buffer for completing the applications once our GMAT is done? I'm not really sure I understand that question very well, but I'm assuming you're asking about the amount of time it takes to work on the applications. It again depends very much on how many schools and where are you planning to apply and stuff like that. But usually when candidates come to us, we usually suggest starting as soon as possible, giving yourself as much time as possible for applications. Ideally, 3 to 4 months is a good amount of time. So that is something that you can definitely look at. There's another question. Can we parallelly start the GMAT application along with GMAT preparation? Is it advisable? Again, that's a very, very personal thing. I did that personally. I prepared for the applications and then I completed the GMAT like 2 days before the deadline. That was something I was very comfortable with. It's a very, very stressful sort of way to go about it. Because then you only have one shot at the GMAT or very, very few shots at the GMAT, and you really need to nail it. Because if you don't, then your application would move to round 2. So it's it's something which is a very personal choice that you will have to make, right? It can work out, it may not work out, but there's a risk associated with both the approaches. What has been my experience for round 2 applications for Indian students outside India? Round trip fine as a top line. I'm not really sure I understand the second part of the question. But essentially, it's absolutely fine. You can apply to round 2. We had great results in round 2 this year. Candidates received almost $450,000 or $500,000 almost dollars in scholarships. We had multiple admits from various schools. So it's absolutely, whenever you are ready, whenever you are sure that you are submitting the best possible application that you can, absolutely go ahead and apply. All right, so then we have another question from Pallavi. What does AdCom look for in the essays? What things should be included, not included in the SOP? Okay, so there's two different things. Essays and SOPs are not the same. SOP is a very specific kind of an essay which talks about the statement of purpose. So the statement of purpose is essentially about why are you applying to this program, why are you applying to this particular school, and why do you require an MBA at this point of time. So essentially, these are the questions that you really need to answer. You need to provide a very clear reasoning into why exactly are you thinking about an MBA at this point of time? What are you expecting to learn from the MBA program? And at the same time, now that you've decided to go for an MBA program, why do you want to do it from this particular school? So these things need to be very, very clearly handled in the SOP. As far as the essays are concerned, the essays can be multifaceted. There are many, many different essays that the schools request. Some schools can have up to 8 to 10 essays. Some schools have just one essay. So it really depends on what the schools are asking about. One thing that I really suggest candidates to do is to really read the question and understand from the question what is the school asking. If the question is about tell us about your biggest achievement, then it should be about your biggest achievement. You need to understand the question, you need to answer the question on point, and at the same time sort of provide the school a peek into the kind of person that you are. There are many things which go into this, and it's not possible for me to sort of answer all the aspects of this, but essays, essentially, one thing that I would suggest is read the question very, very carefully and make sure that you're answering the question directly, right? Do not beat around the bush. Usually essays have a very small word limit. So make sure that you're doing everything that you can to answer the question very, very specifically, right? All right, so we have another question. I'm in my first year of undergrad. Okay, that's quite early. And I want to get into an M7 program. So what extracurriculars do they value? How should I increase my chances of getting selected? A very, very important question here. And thank you for bringing this up. There is absolutely no such extracurricular that the schools value, right? It does not mean that the schools don't value extracurriculars, but there's no such specific extracurricular that they're looking for. What they're looking for is essentially, what have you done? So if you have any particular interests, go ahead and do that. That's what the schools want. They want to see what kind of a person you are. They don't have a specific template for what kind of person you are, right? So just do the things that you like, do them in the best possible way. And that is essentially going to increase your chances. We have another question from Tanvi. Is it safe for recent law graduates to consider MBA? I'm not really sure I understand the question, but yes, it's absolutely safe for considering MBA. If you could expand the question a bit, maybe I would be able to answer this a bit better, right? We have another question from Ansh, which is the best MBA program in USA, considering you want to end up as an investment banker? Well, I think the best MBA program which can help you get into investment banking is the program that helps you get into investment banking, right? So again, there are many, many schools. There is no such best program. There is no such school which guarantees you to get into investment banking. So that's not something that I think we can clarify on very honestly. We have another question. What factors should be kept in mind if I'm more inclined towards specific sector as a job future prospect area? I want to continue into healthcare, but unsure how to go about researching best MBA programs in that sector. That's a very nice question that you bring up. Thank you for sharing that. The best way to look at this is essentially start with the career prospect, right? So start with the career reports from the schools and look at the career reports, and then sort of see which schools have, huge placements or good placements in the area that you want to go into, and then go back to the school website, start looking at the kind of resources that they have available for those sectors, right? So that is something that will really, really help you out. We have a question from Reeti. What is the most accurate way of researching colleges in the US? I think we have already talked about researching colleges in the US quite a bit. So I hope that helps, Reeti. You have another question. Can you explain what would be better for someone with 2 years of work experience, MIM or an MBA, especially in terms of an ROI? The job market with respect to recession we are entering for candidates interested in 2023 intake. My views on Indian institutions such as Masters Union. Okay, so 3 questions. Let me answer those very, very quickly. What would be better for someone with 2 years of experience, MIM or an MBA? Unfortunately, you are in the worst possible sort of candidate pool, right? Because this is the most confusing time for people with 2 years of experience. Should you go for an MIM? Should you go for an MBA? There is no standard answer. I would suggest you to sort of look at both the programs, both MIM programs and MBA programs. Look at them, talk to people, try to understand what they've done, the kind of opportunities that they have, and then choose or make a decision for yourself. Right? There's no standard answer to that. There are people who have gone with an MIM at this stage. There are a lot of people who go for an MBA at this stage. Works out fine for both of those people. So you need to sort of figure out an answer for yourself. There's no way to have a blanket answer on this. The job market is something that I cannot really answer about because I have no clue, very honestly. As far as the upcoming Indian institutes such as Masters Union is concerned, again, it's too early to call anything out. They've hardly been in place for 1 year. It's too early to say anything about them. And again, we don't really follow them because we focus mostly on the top 50 programs only. So I'm not the right person to sort of talk about Masters Union in general. Akansha has a very, very interesting question. What matters more for an MBA application, the kind of work or the brand of the company? This is probably the old, one of the biggest cliches about MBA applications. Both of these things matter, right? The kind of work that you do and the brand of the company, both of these things matter quite a lot. But I think what matters the most essentially is the way you are able to explain it, right? There are a lot of people who apply from unknown companies and they get into some of the top programs. There are a lot of people who apply from very well-known companies and they are not able to do anything from their applications. At the same time, there are a lot of people who apply from very, very well-known companies and they're able to get into some really amazing colleges. The one common thing among all the successful candidates is always that they are able to really, really bring out what they have done very, very clearly, right? And the brand stops mattering after some time. The brand can sort of create an interest, but it does not really do much more than that. You will have to really take control of the narrative and sort of make sure that you are able to explain your work very, very clearly. So both of these things matter, the kind of work that you do as well as the brand that you have. But what matters the most essentially is the way you are able to explain your work, right? We have a question from Priyanka. When you're assessing the application and you feel that their profile is not much worth for top colleges other than GMAT score, do you proceed ahead? Okay, if no, how your team helps for success? Well, I think this goes in for profile evaluation as such. We usually do not proceed ahead if we don't find anything, if their profile does not have a lot of substance. What we do essentially is we give them a very clear feedback in terms of what exactly can they do to make their profile strong enough so that they can get ahead for success in the later applications, right? So that's something we do, right? So it's not just saying it's good or it's bad. It's also providing very candid feedback on how you can improve your profile so that later on you can be successful. You have another question from Matangi. Are one-year MBA programs valued? Okay. I think there is a short answer, yes. ISB is probably one of the best Indian schools and it has a one-year program. In terms of ROI, is Europe or US better? I think in general, if you look at it, 1-year programs usually have a better ROI because they have lower costs. So you could say Europe is slightly bit better than US in this term, right? So Kanchi has another question. What are chances of placement in India with an MBA, with a foreign MBA? Again, that's something I cannot really compare or sort of have much opinion on. There are a lot of people who come back to India. There are a lot of people who don't come back to India. So I think it depends more on what you are able to make use of post your MBA. How are you able to leverage it? And that's what matters the most. Then there is another question about our process. Is there a limit on number of calls a candidate can have while undergoing application development? No, we don't really have any limits on the number of calls that we have. So we are quite open with our candidates and we're quite available at almost a lot of times, right? We have another question. Close to 8 years of work experience, does it act as a disadvantage for MBA applications in general? In general, there is no answer to that, but specifically, it would depend on the school that you're applying to. Look at the average work experience at the schools that you're looking at, and if 8 years is closer to the average, then yes, it's absolutely fine. If it's far away from the average, then it's a disadvantage, right? So at the end of the day, it comes back to the class profile, the average class profile that you have. We have another question from Utsav. Which international colleges are best suited for someone with 8 years of analytics background, looking to get into product management in FAN? Again, that's a very, very specific question. There are no such international colleges which are best suited specifically like that. Nobody is going to be able to do that. It's going to be the school that actually gets you into that. Right? So I think it's going to be difficult to answer that. Priyanka has a question. What is the criteria you follow for successful MBA application? Okay, so maybe Priyanka, we can take this offline. Please feel free to sort of drop us an email separately and we can look at your questions. We can discuss those. And I think that would probably help us a bit better. Akansha has, I think it's a repeat of the question of the previous question. Let's move to the next one. Okay, so Karishma, I think Karishma, right? Yeah, Karishma has a question. Is there any difference between online MBA programs and the regular MBA? Do they have the same value? I want to do an MBA along with my job. All right, so yes, there is a huge difference between online MBA programs and regular MBA programs. Online MBA programs do not have the same value, the same brand value associated with them. Usually what you see as the major brand value of MBA programs, or what you see people sort of fawning over in terms of MBA candidates, it's always about full-time regular programs, right? So you can absolutely go ahead with your MBA, that's absolutely fine, but do keep in mind, in terms of your career, in terms of the effect on your career, or the kind of, or what you are expecting in terms of the results from your career, that's going to be very, very difficult to achieve from an online MBA program. In terms of the knowledge that you will gain, that will remain very similar, right? Because the course does not change, but the kind of brand value that you get, the kind of network that you build, that's going to be very, very different between online MBA programs and regular MBA programs. Deepthi has a question. What kind of extra activities can I perform at workplace to build my profile? All right, so that's a very important question, I think. Thanks for asking that, Deepthi. And what you can do essentially is, most of the workplaces, they have a lot of employee engagement activities that happen. There are learning development teams, there are CSR activities, or otherwise there are events, organizations. There are tons of things happening at your workplace, right? So get indulged in those activities. They will help you build up your profile. If you don't have something happening like that at your workplace, find something apart from work that you can do, outside in your personal life, and even that is absolutely fine. So, they try to find what interests you and do that, whether it's at your workplace or whether it's, you're doing that in your personal profile. Either way, it's absolutely fine, right? We have another question from, again, very specific to brand management. I'm going to skip that. Okay, we have a question. What is the percentage or ratio of application, essay, interview, and GMAT score to get admission into ISB? That is a question you will never find an answer to, Yachna, unfortunately. The only people who know that is the ISB admissions team. I'm pretty sure it's a very heavily guarded secret as well. Then there is another question from Akshat. Are GRE, GMAT an important factor for scholarships? There are many colleges which are waiving off the test score requirement, but I wonder if I take the waiver, would that impact my scholarship chances? GRE, GMAT can be a very, very important factor for scholarships, yes. Again, as far as the scholarship chances are concerned, it's not very clear how much impact does it have on the scholarship chances, right? Because this has never happened before. This is for the first time that it's happening. But a common advice would be, I would suggest you to submit your GRE or GMAT scores, because it provides the schools an extra data point to take into consideration while deciding for scholarships, right? So I would definitely suggest to submit scores for that. We have another question. If you're doing MBA because you want to do a PhD just for the tag, will it be worth it doing an MBA? That is something, again, it depends on, it's a very, very personal thing. If you just want to do it for the tag, it really, I think it's a very personal question in terms of the affordability, in terms of the opportunity cost, in terms of a lot of different things which come into picture. But it will become very difficult for you to justify why do you want to go for an MBA, especially to the top schools, because they are looking for that reason as well, right? We have another question from Karan. What is the average GMAT score to target for a male applicant with BTech and 8 years of work experience in corporate? I think we have already answered this. Look at the average class profile and sort of try to be above that. Another question from Ashwarya. If a university's eligibility criteria is 0 to 2 years of work experience for MIM, can I apply if I have 2.1 years of experience? Okay, so a very, very quick sort of heads up here. The work experience for schools, the way the schools count work experience is never about when do you apply. The work experience is always counted at the time of matriculation, right? So when you join for that intake, how much work experience are you going to have? So if you already have 2 years of experience, by the time you join the program, you will have 3 years, some months of experience, right? And that is what the school is going to count. So you don't have 2 years of experience from the school's perspective, you have 3 point something years of experience. Now, as far as whether you can apply, because you sort of overfulfill that criteria, this is a very, very sort of difficult thing to answer, because some schools are very strict with that 2-year criteria. For example, LBS MIM, you cannot apply because they are very strict with that. But then there are some schools like HEC Paris or ESSEC Business School where you can apply. We have heard of people who have gotten in with 3 years of experience at those schools. So the best way to go about it, what I would suggest essentially is reach out to the admissions team of your target schools and sort of let them answer for you if they would suggest you to apply or not. Okay, so I think I'm going to just take 1 or 2 last questions because we are already hitting 8 o'clock. That's it. I did not realize that it's already been 1 hour. So let me pick up a question which makes sense for everyone. I'm a chartered accountant currently working with more than 1 year of experience. If abroad B schools would consider your 3-year internship as experience. Okay, that's a very, very good question, Shifas. Thank you for asking that. It depends on the school. What I would suggest is reaching out to the schools, reaching out to the admissions team. Some schools accept the 3-year work experience if you can prove that you had worked on these 3 years of articleship post your graduation. So that's the criteria that they usually take. If you worked on your articleship before you graduated from your bachelor's, then I don't think it will be counted as work experience. But again, the best way to figure this out is essentially to reach out to the admissions teams, explain your case, and then ask them if you're eligible or not. Let's see one more question, which sort of makes sense. How to decide? I think we have answered the question of Jeet previously, how to decide if one should do an MBA from India or abroad. If you don't have any preference, go for both. Go for both and then decide once you have the results. Then we have, I think we have answered a lot of these questions already. We have a question. This is interesting. I think we have finished most of the questions. They are getting the questions are getting more personal in nature. So I think we are. If you have any personal questions, please feel free to sort of drop us a message on our email address. I think you already have that. And I will see, we'll try to sort of get this recording out to you guys as well. And if, let's say, by any chance we've missed your questions by mistake, we'll probably host another AMA soon. So again, you can come back there and you can sort of have your question. I really hope you like the session. And if you have any questions about our services, if you want to start working on your applications and you would want to consider us as consultants for your applications, please feel free to reach out, check out our website, see what's there, see our services, see what makes sense or not. And then we can absolutely collaborate together to sort of help you get into the dream schools that you're looking at. Really, really happy to do this. And I hope and wish you a very, very good night. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful session. Thank you so much.